Hi folks, welcome to RJA Impact. Today we're going to be talking about days 7, 8 and 9 of the Paul Flores, Kristin Smart trial. So this is the back end of the week commencing the 1st of August 2022. As a reminder, Kristin Smart, a Cal Poly freshman, went missing 26 years ago, and last year Paul and Flores were arrested in connection with her murder. Paul has been accused of her murder and his father Rubin accused of helping Paul cover up the crime. So let's get to the trial. Very late on Tuesday for about 5 minutes and then a continuation on the 3rd, we had Trevor Buelta. He told the court he was a sophomore at Cal Poly and talked about the party on the night that Kristin went missing, and he arrived there at some time after 10:30. He talked about how a tall girl came up to him, kissed him and took him into the bathroom, and he found out afterwards that this was Kristin Smart. Once in the bathroom, she started to smooth her makeup and asked him, "Do you think I'm ugly?" Kristin also asked who she should hook up with at the party, and Trevor said, "I would pick me." She laughed it off and said that Ross, a basketball player, was a nice guy. He didn't smell any alcohol on her and never saw her drinking. Now, as soon as he walked out of the bathroom, another partygoer came up to him and said, "What I'd like to know is what you did with her in the bathroom." And he answered, "Nothing." The guy laughed and seemed relieved, as he'd assumed that he was Kristin's boyfriend. Now Trevor identifies Paul Flores in the courtroom as that person. Puvril for the prosecution asked, "Are you 100% it was Paul Flores?" "I am," Trevor responded. Again a little later they spoke in the backyard of the party. He says that Kristin still didn't smell like alcohol, but was acting, in quotes, like she was tripping on something. Now this was the last time he saw her. He said that Kristin kissed him there, but she pushed her away, and he said he noticed she was stumbling as she walked away. On cross-examination, Robert Sanger for the defence asked Trevor why he didn't tell investigators in 1996 about his encounter with Paul Flores. And he says he didn't know Paul by name then, and investigators only asked him questions about Kristin's behaviour at the party. Now, there have been some inconsistencies in Trevor's story over time, and Sanger picks up on these, and these were things like what time he arrived at the party, how much beer he'd had to drink, etc. And Sanger also points out that Trevor has done multiple interviews with media outlets. Sanger asked, "Then you did a podcast with Chris Lambert?" "Who is Chris Lambert?" Trevor responded. "He's a journalist, a podcaster." "So he's a podcaster? And is he a journalist in anything else but this case?" And Trevor responds, "I wouldn't know." Another of those juror questions came up. "Did Kristin have a makeup bag with her in the bathroom when you said she was smoothing out her makeup?" And no was the answer to that one. Sanger points out that the first time Trevor ever suggested that Kristin could have been drugged rather than drunk was an interview in 2012. On Redirect, Puvril asks Trevor if he had a personal experience that made him consider the possibility that Kristin was drugged. Trevor says that he was once roofied at a bar and so did have experience of it. "That's exactly how Kristin was acting at the party that night," he said. Puvril also asked, "You saw no evidence of drugs at the party, did you?" "No," he responded. "And when you were roofied, did you ever see evidence of drugs around?" And again he responded no. Again the defence pressed Trevor on how much alcohol he'd had to drink that night, but he insists he doesn't recall being drunk. Eric Wilkins, who is another Cal Poly student who also went to the party on the night Kristin disappeared, then took the stand. He attended the party with a friend but couldn't remember too much about the details of the night. He did remember, however, seeing Kristin lying on the front yard of the house by a bush. Kristin seemed passed out, not dressed for the cold weather, and she wasn't speaking coherently, he said. On cross, Sanger points out that Eric was interviewed by the FBI in 1999, but not interviewed by law enforcement again until January of 2022. Sanger asked him, "You told them you were surprised they contacted you." And Eric responds, "I told them I was surprised I had not heard from them before." His time on the stand was quite brief, only lasting about 30 minutes. The next witness was called, Jennifer Medeiros. Jennifer lived in the dorm across from Kristin Smart, and she described how Kristin's roommate and her friend Margarita all noticed Kristin was missing on the Saturday morning and became concerned as a result. This wasn't normal behaviour, she said. Kristin still wasn't home on the Sunday, her things were still in her room, and we were worried. Pouvril asked, "Why were you concerned?" And Jennifer responded, "She was a person we knew and cared about, and it wasn't normal for her not to come home." Jennifer says that she called the San Luis Obispo Police Department on Sunday but was promptly told it was a campus matter. She says she then called Cal Poly Police Department, who told her it was Memorial Day weekend and people do this all the time. On Monday, May the 27th, after the party, Kristin had still not come back to her room. She called the police again and was told to call back Tuesday if she didn't show up for class. "Was your concern elevated by Monday?" She said it elevated exponentially every day. We were feeling worried and sick. Now at this point in the court, Jennifer's voice was shaking, she held back tears, and actually 2 of Paul's jurors started to cry in addition. With still no word by Tuesday, she again called the campus police, and it was only then that a report was taken. Now Sanger, on cross-examination, asked, "How are you doing?" "Pretty upset," she replied. She was asked if she recalls putting Crystal's friend Jana to bed in Crystal's room after midnight on the 25th. Jennifer says she does not remember that, but, in quotes, "if the record shows that, I'm sure that that's what I did." We then had a very key witness, Derek C., and he was the former roommate of Paul Flores. The prosecution asked Derek to describe the layout of the dorm and his plans for Memorial Day weekend, which he did. He'd actually left for Oakland on the Friday night and didn't return till Tuesday, so in other words, he wasn't on campus over the whole weekend of the party. He said he heard about Kristin's disappearance when he came back, and he asked Paul about it. Derek said that Paul told him he saw Kristin at a party, and she went missing after the party, and he was the last person to see her. He told him that he'd walked 2 girls back to their dorms after the party. Derek said, "I made a joke. You probably did something to her." And Paul joked back, "Yeah, she's at my mum's house right now." Of Paul himself, Derek said that he was confrontational with other people, but that he personally had no problems with him. When he drank alcohol, he became, in quotes, overly aggressive and confrontational with other people. Pouvril asked him if he ever came home drunk from parties, i.e. that is Paul, and then went to take a shower, and Derek says he didn't. Pouvril also asked him a juror question, "Did the dorm room windows open?" And Derek responded, "Yeah, I believe they did. They push out and swing out a couple of feet." And yet another juror question, "When Paul stated, 'She's at my mum's house right now,' did he look you in the eyes?" And yes, was the response. Now during cross-examination, the defence asked him if he noticed anything unusual when he returned, and Derek said he didn't notice anything particular in the dorm that they shared, but he didn't actually inspect Paul's side of the room, however. In a line of questioning by Sanger, Derek said he didn't recall if Paul told him if he went to his dorm room and Smart went to hers. Did Paul Flores have a refrigerator in the dorm room? Yes, he did. Did he keep food in the fridge? Derek says he doesn't recall. Now Sanger asks if Paul would bring back food from work, and Derek says he doesn't recall that either. He was asked if he remembers telling the FBI that Paul kept lots of food in the room, and he doesn't remember that. Oddly here, Sanger then shows Derek an FBI report to refresh his memory on this bit, and when Derek looks at it, he says the report doesn't say anything about Paul keeping food in the room. Sanger took another look at the report, and he couldn't find it either. Then Sanger located an FBI questionnaire which said that, in quotes, Paul always had a lot of canned food, a chili, chips. Now, Derek says it's possible he answered this, but the questionnaire is not filled out in his handwriting. There was another question by a juror, and this was there an exit door at the end of the dorm on the first floor? and Derek responded yes, our room was the 3rd floor from that exit. Rubin's attorney, Misik, questioned Derek about Paul's demeanour after that Memorial Day weekend, and Derek said Paul's demeanour had changed and he seemed more serious. Mario Garcia then took the stand, another Cal Poly student. He played with Paul Flores in Santa Lucia Hall several times a week. Now, midweek following the Memorial Day weekend in 1996, he said that he noticed that Paul had a black eye and was wearing a baseball cap pulled down, in quotes, in a very unusual way, like he was trying to hide it. Paul told him somebody had pushed him at a party, and he described Paul's demeanour was kind of nervous, edgy. On cross-examination, Sanger asked Mario if Paul Flores was generally a friendly guy. Yes, was his response. Paul Flores generally wore a hat, right? Not that I recall, Mario responded. He was notorious for wearing hats, correct? Misik asked, which to me is a pretty weird way of putting it. Anyway, Mario replied no. Eventually, after various questions on this, it was established that sometimes Flores would wear a hat and sometimes he wouldn't. Phew, I'm glad that one's cleared up. Mr. Puvril told you he wanted you to focus on the black eye testimony, so you didn't get cross-examined on all sorts of other stuff, correct? Now, Puvril objects to the question because it's argumentative and the judge sustained this. Sanger again asked, the black eye was in the eyelid, correct? Mario responded it was under the eye. Sanger says, you can't really recall when it occurred. And Mario responded it was Wednesday or Thursday of that week. You said Paul Flores was edgy, he was asked. Yes, was the response. Have you ever been interrogated by the police? And Puvril objects that the question is argumentative and the judge sustained that. Are you aware that Paul Flores had been at another party where he had been thrown over a wall? Puvril objects on relevance grounds and again the judge sustains it. Sanger tried to argue back with the judge on that one, but the judge just said no, it's sustained, you can move to another question. Sanger tried again on asking Paul Flores about whether he had been to another party where there was an altercation. There was a repeat of the objection and a repeat of the judge sustaining it. We then had defence attorney Misik asking what pools did you play? 8-ball? Yes. 9-ball? No. Regular pool? Yeah. Now, personally, I'm not too sure how the specific pool game played is relevant to the trial, but there you go. We had a repeat of the questioning about the hat. Paul always wore a hat when you played pool, correct? Mario said, not that I recall. You don't recall he always wore hats? He was notorious for wearing hats. Well, to me, that is a very weird way of posing the question, and it's the second time it's been put in that way. Now, notorious means well-known or famous for a bad quality or deed, so how they would want him to be notorious, I'm not really sure. Anyway, the response was, I don't recall. On redirect, Puvril clarified with Mario that it was in July 1996 he told police that he saw Paul with the black eye, and it was in the midweek after the Memorial Day weekend. We had Philippe Arias, who was a friend of Kristin's. Now, he was a close friend of hers, he testified, and she would visit his residence hall often to hang out. They met at a different party off campus, but didn't go to parties again after that. He said that the last time he saw Smart was when she slept over at his dorm on the night before she went missing on May the 23rd, 96. It was one of maybe 2 times she'd spent the night. She'd apparently left a CD and her sandals at his dorm, which remained there after she disappeared, he said. Smart had told Philippe that she was having roommate trouble at the time and would sometimes need a place to stay when her roommate had a boy in the room. He was in his own room the night that Smart went missing, he said, adding that he doesn't remember if anybody was with him because too much time has now passed. Sanger asked him if Kristin Smart had tried to get a hold of him in the middle of the night on the May the 25th, either calling up to his window or knocking on the door, and no was the answer to this one. Sanger read a question submitted by a juror: when Kristin would stay over in your dorm, would she normally bring her backpack or any other bags with her? And he can't remember this. Did you go to parties with Kristin? Was another juror question. No, was the response. And yet another one. Did the stairways at the ends of the red brick dorm buildings open to the inside or the outside of the first floor? And he responded the inside. And then finally on redirect, Puvril asked him, was your dorm room on the second floor so that somebody couldn't knock on your window to get your attention? Correct, he responded. We then had DA investigator JT Camp. We've already had him once in this trial and he was back again. He had DMV records for Ruben and Susan Flores, and these were discussed, and this met with several objections. He then published several certified DMV records of Ruben Flores, and we saw that Ruben's address remained the same each time his driver's license was reissued from 1994 through to 2022. Puvril publishes several certified DMV records of Susan Flores, showing that her address was the same as Ruben's in 1993 and 1997. Sanger objects to publishing Susan's DMV records. Relevance, cumulative, invasion of privacy for no apparent reason were his arguments. The judge overrules the objection, and then Sanger objected on 352 grounds. Now that is a rule about undue consumption of court's time, and the judge just responded that that will be noted, but still overruled. Puvril tried to publish the DMV records of Ermelinda Flores. Now that is Paul's sister, who we haven't heard of yet in the trial, and whether we will or not we'll see. But Sanger objected. Relevance 352, invasion of privacy. Puvril then published Paul Flores' driver's licenses from 93, 96, 97, 98 and 2003, all of which list Ruben's house as Paul's home address. And then from 2005 to 2009, his address was in Lawndale, and then 2011 to 2020, there was an address in San Pedro. Sanger briefly cross-examined Inspector Camp. The way you look is not necessarily reflected by your driver's license photo, is it? Not necessarily, was the response. And then Sanger adds that the address on a driver's license is not necessarily where a person lives. That seemed to be not a question, just something that he noted in court. Anyway, the locations of Paul's addresses didn't seem to go anywhere to me, at least at this point in the trial anyway. Now I'm thinking that perhaps when the trial starts to get to the point of establishing what might have happened to Kristin's body, not just immediately over the Memorial weekend, but in the whole 25-26 year intervening period, then this may help establish where the Floreses were living at the time, and this would presumably tie in with the prosecution's alleged chain of events. Just my speculation there. Well, that was it for the week in respect of witness testimony. Since the trial start, we've had one or two jurors withdrawn for one reason or another, but not enough to be concerned about at this point. I really hope you found this update informative, and if you have, then liking the video and hitting the subscribe button would be very much appreciated. And if you ding that notification bell, then you won't miss out on future updates and videos as they're published. Bye for now.